All right, I am going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you guys to eTech Group's webinar for Cyber Resilience for Manufacturers, Securing Your Industrial Network to protect your revenue and reputation. My name is Jackie Slatt. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications at eTech Group. I will be hosting the webinar and then handing it off to our presenters here shortly. I'm going to go over our agenda for the day, or for the presentation, not the whole day. We'll only keep you guys for an hour, but I will go a quick overview of eTech Group. I'll introduce our presenters, and then I will hand it off to them to get into why you guys are all here and cover that information. And we will try to leave about 10 minutes at the end for question and answers. Feel free to submit those if you have any throughout the presentation. We will answer as many as we can. And then if we don't get to all of them, we will put the answers up on our website and we'll notify you guys when that is available. So with that, I will dive right in. eTech Group is proud to be the 2025 System Integrator of the Year with Control Engineering and Plant Engineering. We are one of the largest system integrators in North America. We're headquartered in Westchester, Ohio, and have more than 25 locations throughout North America. With over 600 resources, 450 of those resources are technical or engineers. We have a national scale with localized support and are routinely operate in 7 different industries, including food and beverage, life sciences, mission critical, data centers, consumer product goods, material handling, metals and mining, and advanced materials. eTech Group is a technology agnostic partner with the experience and expertise that allow us to make an impact from the top floor to the shop floor with our clients. We vet our technology partners across all layers of the technology stack to ensure our clients have the best solutions in the industry to draw upon. Our purpose and mission guide us and pave the path through every client interaction. Our purpose is to free people to achieve the full potential of human creativity and innovation. And our mission is to disrupt and evolve the world of industrial automation. We focus on creating quality engineering and information technology solutions that help clients meet both current and long-term business objectives. That is a very short overview of eTech Group, but just wanted to give you guys a quick high-level overview. And with that, I will introduce our presenters. Eric Medecki is a seasoned IT/OT expert with over 30 years of experience bridging information technology and operational technology. As the Director of IT/OT Solutions at eTech Group, he leads initiatives in automation, cybersecurity, and network infrastructure, helping clients modernize operation, enhance security, and boost efficiencies. Matt Smith is a cybersecurity specialist with a decade of experience in automation and OT. He develops tailored strategies to protect critical infrastructure, ensuring systems are secure, resilient, and optimized for industrial environments. And Casey McCarthy is a trusted automation and technology expert with 20 years at eTech Group. He is known for deploying facility networks, configuring automation software, and providing fast, reliable remote support, ensuring smooth operations and strong technical backing. So I want to thank Eric, Matt, and Casey for agreeing to host this with us today. And with that, I will hand it off to them.
All right, let's begin. Thank you all for joining today. As we discuss cyber resilience topics, I'd like you all to keep in mind there is no single product, policy, or procedure that will protect against all potential cybersecurity threats. The best approach is using defense in depth, where you use multiple products and strategies at the perimeter of your network, on your engineering workstations, servers, OT devices, and raising cybersecurity awareness within your organization. We are all responsible for cybersecurity, since any one of us can be the target of a cybersecurity attack. We're going to jump right into cyber resilience and what are its goals. Back one, please. So cyber resilience is the topic at hand, and it refers to the ability of an organization to prepare for, respond to, and to recover from cyber attacks. The steps you take for your organization to implement cyber resilience strategies is vital for safeguarding sensitive data from breaches and unauthorized access. Finally, cyber resilience helps maintain operational continuity, even during cyber incidents, to minimize disruptions to business operations. On the next slide, we will be developing the business case for cyber resilience. Establishing a strong business case for cyber resilience in manufacturing involves examining the financial costs associated with cyber incidents. Reporting of breaches is up 78% from 2022 to 2023. An estimated $140 million are spent per incident for physical damages. A total of about 184 billion has been spent on cybersecurity initiatives in 2024. The considerable cost of downtime should prompt manufacturers to rethink how they allocate resources towards cybersecurity. Moreover, the distinction between compliance and actual security measures must be made clear. Mere compliance does not encompass the full spectrum of vulnerabilities. Additionally, there are implications after cyber incidents, especially for how management views those responsible and how customers view the reputation of the business. Building a reputation for security can also be a competitive differentiator, as savvy customers increasingly favor businesses that can guarantee the protection of their data. On the next topic, we'll talk about challenges that manufacturers face when implementing cyber resilience. One of the first and probably easiest to relate is the process disruption due to changes. A major challenge with implementing new cyber resilience strategies is obtaining the downtime to make those changes. Quite often, it's difficult to schedule this downtime due to production targets, but when you're using downtime to improve your cyber resilience, you are taking control of the schedule. It's far easier to account for downtime before any cyber incidents occur, as opposed to working with the unknown amount of downtime that an incident brings. Another challenge is, as we develop new strategies and new ways of doing business, we are increasing our digital integration. Digital integration enhances our efficiency and optimization, but can create vulnerabilities and risks. Manufacturers are increasingly adopting IoT devices and cloud computing. This broadens the attack surface for cyber criminals by providing more devices and more applications to target. As digitalization progresses, traditional security measures may not suffice. This will necessitate advanced threat detection and response mechanisms. The next topic of challenges is cybersecurity awareness. As mentioned before, we are all responsible for securing our organization's data, as well as our individual data. The challenge lies with getting everyone on the same page. As shift changes occur in facilities, as turnover occurs in our organizations, and as cyber threats evolve, it can feel overwhelming for anyone to stay aware of all the threats in cybersecurity. That is where cybersecurity awareness training on a regular basis, please note, it has to be regular for it to be effective. It can be quarterly or whatever ends up working for your organization. But again, keep it regular. When you are regularly reinforcing the concepts of cybersecurity and what your associates, your employees can do to effectively address those risks, it can reduce the overwhelming feeling that security can bring, and it will help us all stay current on the latest threats. And finally, the last challenge that's very common is legacy software and systems. Many of us have worked with systems that need to stay operational, and we can't change them even when the operating systems have gone out of support. A lot of manufacturers, software, hardware manufacturers will craft special ways of or agreements for supporting the devices, but that can be very costly. So I can speak to even some of that myself. Within the last 10 years, I worked on recovering a system that was running a blister packaging line. That system was running Windows NT, and that was released in 1993. And that was within the last 10 years. Upcoming this October, we will all have to deal with legacy applications and software when Microsoft ends security support for Windows 10. And that's coming up in October of 2025 this year. Next, we'll cover the threat landscape for cyber incidents. Since we have covered the common challenges with implementing new cyber resilience strategies and tools, let's discuss the cybersecurity threats we are likely to face. These include ransomware, phishing, and insider threats. Ransomware is a type of malware that can either encrypt your data or lock you out of your systems. The attackers then require a ransom payment to either decrypt your data or unlock your access. These types of attacks can cause significant operational disruptions and financial loss as you lose access to your data or possibly to files to run your systems. An example of this is the WannaCry crypto ransomware attack that lasted several months in 2017. This is where the attackers demanded payment in Bitcoins to decrypt victims' files. WannaCry used a known vulnerability that was patched by Microsoft 2 months before the attacks began. Computers with the Microsoft patch installed were protected against the vulnerability. The attack hit around 230,000 computers globally. This included even large organizations such as the NHS hospitals in the UK. And you can see when a hospital loses access to their systems or their data, it can impact patients' lives. Thankfully, most manufacturers aren't working in life safety directly, but the operational impacts can be pretty great when exposed to things like ransomware. The common advice with ransomware is not to pay the ransom. And a great example is within WannaCry, where victims typically didn't get their files back because the ransomware didn't include a mechanism for connecting the victims to the payments that were made. Financial losses due to that attack were estimated around $4 billion across the globe. Another common cyber threat is phishing attacks. This is where attackers use social engineering to pose as trusted sources to elicit data from vulnerable targets. Common type of phishing is sending emails, spoofing the sender's identity, and providing links in the emails to compromised web pages to gather personal data or credentials to log into systems. Another common type is sending text messages to targets posing as business executives to prompt the target to purchase gift cards and send the codes back to the attacker so they can make use of those gift cards. A good example is between 2013 and 2015, where Google and Facebook were the victim of a supplier that they shared called Quanta that was compromised. In that attack, the attackers sent fake invoices pretending to be from Quanta, and the invoices were paid by Facebook and Google. Thankfully, they were able to take legal action, and the attackers were arrested in in Lithuania, and extradited to the US. Facebook and Google were able to recover around 50 million of the 100 million stolen. So you can even see where organizations of that size are susceptible and don't always get all of the resources stolen back. And the last topic I want to cover is insider threats. These pose risks from employees misusing their access to sensitive information or systems. This highlights the need for vigilance, even from within our organizations. In late April 2022, Apple filed a lawsuit against a startup called Rivos. In that lawsuit, they purported that the company took part in a large coordinated effort to poach their employees, the Apple employees, who worked on proprietary systems on a chip technology, or SoC. Rivos hired around 40 ex-Apple employees, and Apple accused at least 2 engineers of stealing gigabytes of confidential SoC information. That information could significantly accelerate their competitors' development of their own SoC solutions. Apple alleges that it was a multi-billion-dollar data theft, saying it had spent that amount of money on development for their product and more than a decade of research on the topic. And now we're going to hand this off to Matt, and he's going to dig into the cyber resilience best practices and methodology.
Thank you, Casey. Keeping in mind the previous slides, next we'll be looking at OT cybersecurity best practices and general approaches on how you can implement those into your OT networks. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There are many different methodologies out there that discuss the best way to integrate cybersecurity into your OT networks. And in this presentation, we are aggregating and discussing the overlapping recommendations across the most common guides, such as NIST and IEC 62443. The general flow and how we're discussing these closely maps with the lifecycle that follows the anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt mindset. Anticipate is all about building a strong foundation. Withstand is about preventing and containing attacks. Recover is about minimizing downtime and restoring operations. And last but not least, adapt is about evolving defense against emerging threats and keeping up with today's ever-changing threat landscape, as Casey previously touched on. So let's go to the next slide. Starting with anticipate, we'll be looking at some of the building blocks or essentials in your OT cyber program. These recommendations are key to understanding your existing OT networks so that you can strategically remediate and begin your OT network transformation. The first security control within the anticipate section is related to your OT asset management program. This entails keeping an up-to-date asset inventory of all of your OT assets and marking which ones are the most critical to your operations. This can be done via manual or automated means and is essential for all other controls because you have to know what you have in order to protect those assets. This also relates to ensuring all unauthorized devices are caught and quarantined. This means you don't want a rogue device to be able to lurk on your network and go undetected for a long period of time. This allows for attackers to perform recon and other attack methods without you being aware. On this same topic, once you capture this baseline of assets, you can then look at implementing a baseline set of security controls on those assets, ensuring that the assets have up-to-date firmware and are protected according to their importance to your network. The second control type that we're looking at today is network and access control. The reason that these are on the same slide is oftentimes with OT environments, the access control must be done from the network. This is due to embedded OT systems not always providing the amount of granular access controls that would be needed to ensure you're implementing sound security best practices. The most common way to do this is to create zones and conduits in your network. This means creating a light group of assets and putting them into the same zone or subnet, then putting a firewall in between all those different types of zones in our network, aka this is the conduit piece or the piece that allows those zones to talk via a least privileged manner. These like-minded assets can be based on the device type or even the machine, area, or line. This all depends on the way you're planning to implement this control within your environment. When considering all facets of your OT network, it's likely that you'll need to integrate some type of remote access. It's important to design this remote access with zero trust principles. The first recommendation is to always use MFA for remote access. The second recommendation is to configure your firewall policies to allow only remote access into the OT DMZ jump boxes. These jump boxes should then be permitted to access your OT network via firewall policies, which should include some type of traffic inspection. Another way to implement access control, if your OT assets support it, is to create minimal least privilege access control structure, such as full admin, normal user, and zero access approach. This ensures that your operators can still perform their daily functions and your administrators can still use their most privileged accounts only as needed. The third control within the anticipate section of today's presentation is regarding supply chain risk management. This is a control that has become ever more urgent as today's attacks via supply chain are ever increasing. Some examples of these attacks are the SolarWinds attack of 2020, where attackers gained access to SolarWinds Orion and injected malicious code into one of their software updates, which was then distributed to thousands of customers. Another example of a supply chain attack was the NotPetya attack of 2017, where malware was spread through a compromised update of the accounting software ME-Doc, which is widely used in Ukraine. Given these examples, a good way to begin keeping your vendors accountable starts with a basic security assessment. This assessment is typically a baseline of security controls that you would like to ensure your vendors are at least implementing within their own networks. This ensures that they are meeting your own internal security controls, which can greatly reduce the risk of them being a point of entry for malware into your OT environments. And the last control within this anticipate section that we'll be discussing today is all about the importance of training and awareness for your employees. This is something you might already be doing, as it's a very common practice to have IT awareness and training. And that's great. But we're also suggesting infusing OT-specific cyber training into your learning management systems. This ensures that your employees are learning the right and wrong ways to interact with OT-specific computers in today's world. Examples of topics could be anything ranging from the use of portable storage, whether it's allowed or not, and all the way up to learning about your company's best practices with accessing the internet or email from computers that have direct access to your OT systems. This is crucial due to the level of risk these computers pose to your OT networks.
The second key element for implementing OT cyber resilience is the withstand element. This includes preventing and containing attacks. On these topics, we will be discussing endpoint protection, which is securing devices, all of them, that connect to your company data using best-in-class software to detect compromises and perform initial remediation. Next, we'll talk about multi-factor authentication, which is a method of providing a second step in authentication that requires physically having something that can provide a code or accept a push to verify your identity. Then we'll cover least privilege permission assignments. This ensures that employees have the minimum access only to the systems and the data they need to perform their job tasks. Then we'll also cover securing baseline configuration and consistent patch management. This involves configuring a standard baseline of security settings to meet the minimum accepted level of security on devices. And consistent patch management maintains the expected baseline and keeps devices current against known threats. A perfect example is the WannaCry one that I mentioned earlier, where if you had patched when Microsoft released, your computer wasn't vulnerable to that threat. And then we'll also cover the tools to detect anomalies and monitor for known vulnerabilities, which aids in the maintaining the security of your environment. Next slide, please. So within endpoint protection, there are OT-aware IDS and IPS solutions. That stands for intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. There are many products that provide those services, and within that market of products, there are those that focus on OT networks and include parameters for OT-specific devices. Other products in that market may not include those provisions. IDS and IPS solutions operate at the perimeter of networks where targeted attacks are most likely to breach your environment by probing for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in your firewalls and routers. Application allow listing, which is the next item on this list, involves controlling endpoint software installations and limiting those devices to use only known good software. There is an initial deployment period where you detect software that is currently in use and begin building the allow list. Once the initial deployment period completes, the software to control the allow list will block any software not on that list. And then it will prompt the administrators for approval of any new software. We will wrap up this slide with talking about monitoring network traffic, where intrusion detection and prevention systems cover the perimeter of your networks. Additional tools focus on internal traffic for abnormal types of network traffic. While the focus of this webinar is on cybersecurity, network monitoring tools offer more benefits for non-security network issues. These tools can also help troubleshoot any changes in network traffic and can help identify opportunities to improve network design for better performance. On the next slide, we'll talk about how we can withstand cyber threats. MFA, or multi-factor authentication, or remote access, helps protect those systems that are on your perimeter or allow access to your data. MFA is useful for securing many applications that are exposed to the internet, such as VPNs and web applications. Multi-factor can be summed up with what you know plus, what you know, such as your password or a PIN, plus what you have, such as an authentication app or authenticator app or a token generator device. These mechanisms help prove your identity beyond just knowing the password. Role-based access control is another method for withstanding attacks or threats. That includes setting up employee roles and assigning specific permissions to those roles that allow the minimum level of access for employees to complete their tasks. This is a great policy to implement to limit exposure to insider threats. So for those employees that might get poached, or maybe somebody sends data to an external source they shouldn't, external recipient, you are limiting their ability to send data that they should not have access to. If employees have access to everything or to many things beyond their role, it's far easier to have data loss to insiders accessing information that they don't need for their role. And then finally, blocking default admin accounts is another great control. All devices come from manufacturers with default usernames and passwords to allow initial configuration. These defaults are easily accessible by a simple internet search. You typically only have to put in the name of the product, brand and model, plus default username and password, and you'll get those. The recommendation is to change the password on default admin accounts and create new admin accounts, finally, with disabling the original admin accounts. You change the default password plus disable the default accounts. In the event that the account gets re-enabled, the default password is still changed to help prevent unauthorized access. On the next part of Withstand, we are covering secure configuration and patch management. Secure baseline configurations include devices that come with many security options. Manufacturers often have many of those options unconfigured to allow for initial easy setup and to allow administrators to customize devices and software to best fit their environment. Configuring baseline security options becomes critical during initial setup to maintain the minimum security level within an environment to meet the baselines we talked about earlier. And additionally, using those baselines can improve cyber insurance, or can prove to cyber insurance providers that you are meeting their expectations of minimum security to issue the coverage for your business. The second topic here is risk-based patching. Certain reported security vulnerabilities require immediate patching to address active attacks that are using vulnerabilities to gain access to accounts or to networks. By having provisions for deploying critical updates ahead of lesser priority updates, you are in a better position to address those threats, be it they are active or maybe not active at that time. And finally, change management validation is a great tool. This involves having a change log where employees in network administrator roles keep track of planned and unplanned changes. Change tracking is a great way to ease troubleshooting, as well as proving that the change was tested before deployment. I'm going to hand the next one off to Matt, where he will discuss anomaly detection and monitoring.
This last control type on withstand, we are discussing the importance of having systems in place to provide anomaly detection and monitoring. This type of system is most commonly referred to as a logging solution. It's also commonly referred to as a SIEM, which stands for Security Information and Event Management. This is where all of your critical assets are sending their logs to be analyzed, aggregated, and reviewed by what would typically be your operations teams. Some assets that you would see sending this type of solution would be your firewalls, your endpoint antivirus software, and your intrusion detection systems. The reason this is so valuable for organizations is because this type of system is proficient with aggregating the logs across many different vendor and software solutions and providing a correlation between those different log sources. An example of this can be anytime your firewall detects possible malicious network traffic, it would likely be the case that your antivirus on those endpoints would be seeing the same possible malicious activity. A good SIEM solution should provide AI-driven analytics to trim down on the number of logs that your team has to review, which in turn helps to turn their focus to the threats that actually matter. Selecting the right SIEM aids your security teams so they can provide continuous and efficient monitoring without suffering from alert fatigue. This tool is also beneficial for compliance purposes. With a lot of industry regulation requirements, you must keep logs from your systems for a certain period of time to ensure these logs can be reviewed anytime there's an incident. The third type of control on our agenda for today is recovery. This is crucial because not every company thinks it's going to be hacked, but if you can plan as if you are going to be hacked, then it goes a long way in terms of recovering and minimizing your downtime in the future if it were ever to happen to your organization. One of the first ways to prepare for incident response and recovery is to begin establishing a baseline of general incident types applicable to your organization so that you can begin creating scripted playbook responses to these incidents. Within these playbooks, it's important to establish the workflows to be performed and the roles to which each workflow should be assigned. This helps to ensure that incident response can be carried out effectively. For OT, it's important to ensure that roles are assigned across multiple different teams within your organization. The first role to consider would be your incident manager to oversee the entire incident response process and ensure effective communication and decision making. Other roles to consider are the IT and the OT support leads. Both are responsible for coordinating the efforts, but they have a different focus and provide different areas of expertise within your OT networks. Once you have crafted your response strategies, it's recommended to practice carrying out those playbooks. A great way to do this is by running regularly scheduled incident simulations, also referred to as incident tabletop exercises. This is a way to practice going through your playbook in a simulated and low stakes setting. Doing this ensures that your organization is prepared if disaster is ever to strike. The second control type that we'll be covering is backup and restoration. The importance of having safe and reliable backups cannot be overstated. Having backups ensures a high likelihood that no matter what security incident takes place, you're able to recover fully. Having backups for your OT network should include your critical OT assets, including but not limited to your PLCs, HMIs, and your SCADA configurations. Backups should always be configured to run automatically within your networks. This is standard, and it's the most common way to perform backups of any type when using modern backup software. It is important that when you're selecting backup infrastructure, you're choosing the right software for your OT network assets to be fully integrated and supported. A really simple to understand and effective backup strategy is the 3-2-1 backup design. This approach calls for keeping 3 data copies in total, storing them on 2 different media types such as hard drive, cloud, tape, and ensuring one is kept off-site. This strategy helps to protect the integrity of your backups by ensuring recoverability if one or more of your storage locations or media fail. The next section we'll be looking at today is Adapt. We'll be discussing many ways in which you can design continuous improvement and OT threat hunting into your OT network. Taking some of these recommendations and applying them in your OT networks can help you to prepare for the evolving security threats that our industry is facing. The first control in this section is all about risk assessments. An OT risk assessment is a process used to identify, evaluate, and prioritize risks to your OT assets. Risk assessments are often thought of as the first step in developing an OT cyber program, as well as the last step in an OT cyber program. Oddly enough, both are true. This is due to the fact that cybersecurity is an ongoing life cycle. It is recommended that recurring risk assessments do take place. A good rule of thumb is to perform a risk assessment at least once per year. This is recommended for many reasons, such as industry standards, regulatory requirements, and operational changes. As your OT networks evolve over time due to operational changes, so does the threat landscape, as well as the list of best practices. This is why ongoing risk assessments are key to having an accurate view of all of your strengths and weaknesses as they change. Once you have your risk assessment, it should provide you with a list of recommended remediations, all of which should be marked with priorities. These priorities should be based on the actual threat to your OT networks, so you can place those with a higher priority first on your roadmap. The second control type we'll be discussing is centered around best practices for OT vulnerability management. It's important to develop a strategy that can be used to determine whether a patch should be applied or not. There are many ways to do this, but the general premise is to categorize your vulnerabilities with an easy to follow approach. This helps to ensure that your vulnerability program has follow through. An example of this would be the now, next, never method. This method is used in the Dragos platform, but it's an example to speak from. Now focuses on vulnerabilities that pose the highest risk and require immediate action. Next means schedule remediation for vulnerabilities that are important but not as urgent. And never calls for monitoring vulnerabilities that pose minimal risk or are impractical to address. Given the unique nature of many OT environments, it's often the case that patching happens very infrequently. This means you need another way to address vulnerabilities, which is what we talk about next. Another common way to mitigate these risks is by applying compensating controls. An example of this would be to use an intrusion prevention system to shield unpatched systems from known threats by applying virtual patching. This is a common feature on next-gen firewalls that you typically see deployed between IT and OT networks. You can also deploy an intrusion detection system, which is built into many of today's OT cybersecurity products that sit within your OT network and passively listen by a span or a tap port. This doesn't block the attempts to exploit unpatched vulnerabilities, but it monitors the traffic and it will alert you if it detects an attempted exploit. This then requires follow-up by your security team. The last example is to build in network segmentation to isolated legacy systems within your OT networks. Then you can use firewall rules to completely block network access to unpatched vulnerabilities within legacy assets. This reduces your attack surface and it requires the attacker to be on the same subnet or physically in front of the legacy asset. It's important to note that other than simply applying a patch, there are many ways to respond to vulnerabilities. The goal of vulnerability management is to reduce your risk. That's why having a program in place and documenting your decisions is critical. The third topic for ADAPT is threat hunting and continuous monitoring. In order to begin threat hunting, we first need to determine what data to analyze. In general, network traffic is the easiest way to collect tons of useful metadata that can be analyzed by your SIEM. Network analysis is commonly used by today's industry-leading OT cybersecurity platforms. The general approach entails passively listening to your OT networks and capturing the traffic to then be analyzed. Ideally, you place a few network sensors around your most critical parts of the OT network. The second step required after aggregating these logs into a central location is to perform analysis of these logs. With today's OT cyber tools, you can find these two requirements baked into the same product. The goal here is to aggregate your network data to hunt for threats, which is done by checking for anomalies and indicators of compromise. These tools rely on threat intel, which provide insights into emerging threats and tactics, techniques, and procedures, also referred to as TTPs. The goal here is to build the security into your OT networks so that you have a source of continuous monitoring as well as automated threat hunting. And the last topic for ADAPT, but certainly not the least, is information sharing and collaboration. This is often done via partnerships or industry groups who share a thread of commonality. As mentioned in the previous slide, threat intel is based off of attacker tactics, techniques, and procedures, also referred to as TTPs. These TTPs are based off of information gathering and shared after an attack takes place. This occurs because as a community, we're stronger together than we are apart. We're able to take learnings and technical data from attacks and create tools to better prepare ourselves against these attacks in the future.
In this presentation, we have covered many different layers that are involved in protecting your OT networks, ranging from anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt topics. We covered how you can strengthen your network security through the use of monitoring, access controls, and effective incident response strategies. And finally, we covered how cyber resilience includes continuous improvement. With a threat landscape that is ever evolving and new technologies that are constantly being developed, it is important to regularly review and improve your cyber resilience strategies. And next, we can talk about how eTech Group can help you with that process.
So you've heard a lot today about cybersecurity and things around what you can do or what you should be doing in your environment. But what a lot of people don't understand is how do we get there? So the things that we obviously have learned today that cybersecurity is the big thing that we're talking about here, where we need to reduce the network vulnerabilities and things of that and increase our security posture. But we also have concerns around insurance. Insurance concerns are definitely an issue today because insurance costs are rising due to cyber threats. So what can eTech do and where should you start when it comes to your networks? So how can we help you, or how can we get you where you need to be? One thing that we do is we recommend people go out and we assess the network. You have to have an understanding of what is in your environment, where your vulnerabilities potentially are, and where you need to remediate. So the things that we do and we can do, and we do all the time, is we go in and we map the networks. We understand what devices are out there and how things are interconnected. This is very important. We have to understand what is living out there to make sure that there's no devices that are giving access to bad threat actors, and we need to control that access. Once we do those types of things and we assess the network, we can create, your roadmaps for future planning, and it allows us to help you with your budget and to get you where you need to get your security posture in line with what the cybersecurity requirements are for your insurance needs. If we can go to the next slide. So throughout that process, we can help people come up with a 3 to 5 year plan. We know that you can't just click your heels together overnight and remediate everything that you need to remediate. But what we do is we help our customers come up with plans, and we talk about the highest risks in their areas that are most susceptible to cyber threats. We can help with the architecture, whether it's physical infrastructure or the logical infrastructure or both. And we can get into all the compliance and things that are necessary around the cybersecurity requirements and the insurance, which are big driving factors today. Next slide. So when we go out and we do these types of things, we all know that security is multifaceted. So in our relationships with our vendors, such as some of the ones you see here, we're able to have lots of different partners for lots of different situations. Not everybody's security is going to be the same. There's going to be different security requirements based upon what you're trying to do in the industry. And so therefore, with our versatile group of vendors, we have that ability to bring all different types of security to the table. As you can see here, we're teamed up with some of the top players in the industry today. And I don't believe and I don't feel that this slide covers all the people that we really deal with, but these are just some of the top people. But with that being said, I want to thank Matt and Casey and the team for going over stuff. And I would like to open everything up for discussion.
So feel free to add any questions to the chat. We'll look there. We do have a few. So how, for an organization that's just getting started, I think you kind of covered this, but I'll just ask it in. What's the first step that they should look at? What's their best way to take action immediately against any vulnerabilities they have?
So the first step to take those actions is you really need to assess things. You really have to understand where your vulnerabilities are. Where are your pain points on your network? And that is the first step, because a lot of times we don't understand it because we've been producing whatever it is we've been producing for so long. If it's not broke, don't fix it type attitude. But unfortunately today, as we try to gain more data out of our networks or data and understand what that process is, how can we become more efficient? We're interconnecting these devices, and we're interconnecting these devices to the internet. And so we need to assess. That is the first step. And then once we can assess and we understand what those vulnerabilities are, we work towards that plan of remediation, or what is the most painful piece, or where's the highest risk of vulnerability and where could we be compromised. And so that's where we need to start. And a lot of times it's very simple things that we can do.
Casey, Matt, do you have anything to add? Did Eric cover it?
I'd say you covered it pretty well. Yeah, understanding the environment is the first step. You can't really effectively make changes or plan any changes until you know all the parts of your environment.
Awesome.
Jackie, we did have one come up in the Q&A, and what are the general requirements for data retention on security log data, and what is the 21 CFR standard number? They're curious on the retention time, as it is 2 years for historical process data.
So when it comes to, I can touch on some of this and I'll lean some of it to Matt, but when it comes to retention, everybody's retention can be a little bit different. Different things like pharma and some of those things may need longer retention based upon what their requirements are, and others may not need as much. So in regards to the classification there, Matt, can you speak to that by chance? I don't have that actual one up in front of me.
Yeah, I don't know the 21 CFR specifically, but a good rule of thumb is typically either 180 days or 1 year. If you look at like some of those NIST frameworks, they don't specifically call out a specific retention period, but what's important is that you actually have one. And then I think as you get into the IEC standards, they actually call for specific retention requirements or some of the FDA standards. And then you also have, if you're working, it also depends on if you're working within general best practices and frameworks, or if you're working within regulatory requirements, because it can then slightly vary. But typically, if a client isn't sure, 1 year is a pretty good retention number for the actual security logs and how long to keep those.
One thing I might add to that is that when you're thinking about backups, you need to be thinking about what type of solutions you're using for backup. There are a lot of backup solutions out there, but not every backup solution is a great solution. And what I mean by that is we need to have a backup solution that's got ransomware immunity. We need to have something that is inspecting that data for changes that are anomalies before it commits those changes to backups. And by doing that, in the event of an outbreak, you have a backup that you can guarantee that you can go back to and spin up. What we like to do is we'd like to have backups that are ransomware immune, but they're also that live on appliances where we can take those backups and turn those VMs on in the event of a disaster and spin that environment up within a matter of a couple minutes flat. And that will allow for businesses to maintain production and maintain operation, where then you have time to take care of that remediation on whatever might have been infected.
Okay, I've got another question over here. How do you ensure that third-party vendors and partners aren't your weakest link?
That's a great question. So how can you ensure that? And so what we do is we talked a little bit about MFA, multi-factor authentication, and how those connections work. So sometimes, a lot of times in manufacturing environments, our machine builders, things like that, they bring in remote connectivity devices like E1s, and they put them in the machines so that they can support you, when needed. But the problem is those bring in vulnerabilities because you don't know when those people are in your networks, or you don't know what might be on their computers that they're accidentally driving into your networks. So how do we stop it? How do we prevent it? So what we do is we eliminate those devices in our plants. And then what we do is we create jump boxes, like Casey mentioned earlier, where you have a single source or a single engineering workstation that has all of the software needed to connect to everything in your plant and to support the plant. And what we do there is then we have things like RMM technology or MFA type solutions where we can restrict vendors to a specific machine, a specific device, a specific workstation, and we can understand when they're in the system, and we can actually prevent those people from transferring files and all kinds of things through that solution. And then on top of it, we can actually keep those people from being in those systems when they shouldn't be. So it's an access that's granted upon request. And by doing those things and having those types of measures in place, that will help increase your security posture and then help also meet the cybersecurity recommendations from the insurance companies.
Casey, Matt, anything else to chime in on that one? Or I've got another question or two we can cover if we've got 5 minutes left. Should we go to the next one?
Well, I was going to say, not on that particular topic, but yes, that being able to control how your vendors access your network is incredibly important. Because like Eric said, you don't always know exactly what steps they're taking. So putting those controls in place allows you to know what steps they take when they connect, like you mentioned. Another thing along that topic was also requiring your vendors to complete a survey of security standards. So when you send it out to your vendors, that way you're getting them to commit to providing a baseline security when they are interacting with your data and your networks.
All right,
Good
awesome.
point.
Sorry, did I cut somebody off?
No, what's the next
Okay.
question that you have there?
What tools or technologies have been the most effective in improving your resilience to cyber attacks? So I know we touched on some of the partners.
So when we think about tools, what's the one tool that I think of when I go into businesses that help people out of the gate? A lot of times our IT departments do not have an understanding of what is living in our OT, which is our operations technology area, the manufacturing space. And so what we do is we segment and isolate the OT from the IT. Now, we obviously want to have communications down there for analytical data, but what we do is we implement firewalls, and we create a firewall at a bare minimum to protect the OT environment. And that firewall that we implement needs to be a firewall of a different brand and manufacturer than the firewall that lives on the enterprise side supporting the business operations. And the reason for that is because if your enterprise firewall gets an infiltration, that your OT firewall will hopefully stop that, because you're using a different manufacturer, a different methodology on how they address security. So that would be the first step and the easiest step in protecting your OT environment.
Another great tool is next generation antivirus, NGAV. eTech currently recommends something like CrowdStrike Falcon, and which many of you may have heard of, but it's still one of the best solutions for that space. The way it works better than traditional antivirus is that it evaluates how different computer processes launch other computer processes. It uses that behavior and updates its definitions and will compare against other behaviors to know if something is an anomaly. So that next gen AV really steps up the protection on the endpoints to allow you to control them a lot better and have less of an impact on the software. A lot of times OT software can be resource intensive. Next Gen AV does a really good job of reducing the amount of overhead it needs to perform its tasks in protecting the systems. So I always think about that endpoint protection as being another very important piece to fitting into an OT network.
Okay. Matt, do you have anything else?
Nope, I think that was pretty good.
Okay. I have one other question that came in on the chat and I don't know, I know we have 1 minute left, so I don't know if we'll be able to cover this. If not, we can add it, address it after, but it's how do the recent DOJ firings of CISA employees change our approach to IT/OT security?
Well, I can speak a little bit to this. How does it affect it, right? So you're gonna, the recent workforce reductions at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, it has significant implications for IT and operational technology security strategies, right? So reports are indicating that up to a third, if I remember correctly, of the CISA staff may be affected by including key personnel and threat hunting and incident responses. That provides a lot of challenges, particularly concerning OT security, right? In response to those, organizations, I think, should consider following adjustments to their IT and OT security approaches. Things like maybe enhancing collaboration with the private sector entities. Basically what I'm saying here is that CISA's reduced capacity, basically forming partnerships with private security firms to help bridge the gap in threat intelligence and incident response capabilities. That's one. Another thing might be investment in internal security resources. You might need to allocate additional resources for internal security teams and focus on training personnel and OT specific cybersecurity practices in order to mitigate reduced support. Those are a couple things. And one other thing that you could do would be regular security assessments, conducting frequent security audits and assessments for both IT and OT environments. You can help identify and address vulnerabilities proactively and hopefully to reduce resilience on external agencies such as those. I don't know if that hopes to answer some of your question.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate it, and I see we are at 12 o'clock now. So I want to thank Eric, Casey, and Matt for leading the presentation, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. And we will hope to see you again at our next webinar. So thank you, guys.